So, if you are approached by an applicant or an objector who's asking for your support, how do you tend to respond?
Well, in the first instance, I'll get in touch with the case officer to see if there are any particular issues that I need to be aware of. Obviously, I'll have a look if it's an application that's just come in to see what the detail is on it. And then I think it's a case of care and common sense. I'll certainly retain my impartiality. I'll stick to process rather than opinion, so that I'll hear what they have to say, but obviously won't say anything that would in any way indicate that I have a particular sort of outcome in mind myself, given the fact that we can't do anything that's going to lead us over to be seen to have predetermination. I won't even venture along the sort of predisposition route. I'll just listen, as I say, talk about process, and leave it at that. Having said that, I'm aware of one case I had not that long ago where it was somebody who was going to put in an application and they wanted to talk to me about it. And I knew full well that it was going to be completely contrary to policy, because it wasn't within an existing small settlement boundary, it was outside of that. So I spent my time sort of pointing out those sort of facts to the person, but they said they were going to persist with it. They asked if I'd take it to committee, and I said, well, in terms of policy, if there are strong policy reasons why I wouldn't, then that would be the case. So I didn't. It duly got refused, they appealed, and then it duly got dismissed by the inspector, which clearly demonstrated the points I made of them at the outset. So I think to some extent with a case like that compared to others, it's more a case of what the particular circumstances are. But going back to my original point, just sort of listen and talk about process, but don't give any opinions.
Thank you. Linda.
As Mike says, I'd also get in touch with the planning officer if you have prior warning, but the public are very good at ambushing you, be it on the telephone, in the supermarket, walking around the corner. And at that point, of course, you can't say, well, I better go and speak to the officer. So you've got to sort of bluff it out, really. But I'd always listen to what they have to say and show an interest, but would equally let them know that as I sit on the planning committee, I'm unable to voice an opinion on the merit or lack of on that or any application coming forward to committee. Certainly, if members of the public from my ward ask me to take something to committee, then normally I would tell them, because we're parished, I have 13 parish councils in my district ward, and they would take it to the parish council, and the parish council would then request it to go to committee normally in conjunction with me. But I'd recognise that by, as Mike says, voicing an opinion, I'd put myself at risk of predetermination, and then would have to step down from any decision making, so would not be able to vote. They need to understand that. And if it was prior to an application going forward, I'd suggest that they made representation and possibly speak at either a parish or town council meeting before the planning committee, and perhaps register to speak in person at the planning committee meeting. And it's quite acceptable for me for you to explain the process to them. You just, as Mike says, mustn't express an opinion. That will get you in trouble every time.
Thank you, Linda. So, if there's a large public presence at the planning committee and they're all interested in a particular application, do you feel added pressures when it comes to speaking and voting? And how do you approach your contributions to the debate and the decision making in such a situation?
A large public presence at a planning meeting can feel quite intimidating and unsettling. Quite a few years ago, and I remember it clearly, so it obviously had an effect on me. We had 100 people come to our meeting in protest at some proposed wind turbines. And they protested at the site visit beforehand, and they were waiting with banners as we re-entered the council building for the bus, and we had the radio sticking microphones in our faces, and emotions were obviously running high. And there was not enough room for them all in the chamber, so an additional room with a live recording of the process was used as well, and it was all a bit of a logistical nightmare. We'd always expected a large presence and had been briefed by our officers as to how best to conduct ourselves and reminded to remain professional at all times. But that was then difficult to do because emotions were running high, and it included not speaking to any of them, even if they were known to us, and keeping our comments brief and to the point. Banners were not allowed in the chamber, but they were still quite noisy. And I remember the chairman at that time advising them that if they weren't quiet, they'd have to leave. And that did seem to work. And in the end, the application was refused on landscape grounds. So they left happily and we adjourned for a well-earned tea break to give them time to leave. But I do remember and thought at the time that had I been a new planning committee member, that really would have been quite daunting. And the temptation to sort of calm people down or say something that will stop them being as agitated, you must resist that at all costs. It's not your place. There are officers and we had member support officers there, making sure people had somewhere to sit or somewhere to stand and knew how to behave and conduct themselves.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Mike?
Yeah, well, I certainly don't grandstand as some occasionally do, which I don't do that. I try to be objective rather than emotive in the arguments I put forward, and also try to be tactful so that I'm not in any way, sort of winding them up, not deliberately, but by being tactful, you sort of perhaps put the objective view across without causing too much upset, if that is to be the case. I don't get intimidated. I always remember one press report many years ago. I wasn't chairing that meeting, but the reporter wrote that Councillor Haines was unfazed by the public reaction to what he said. So that's always been my attitude. If you're chairing the meeting, then clearly, as Linda just mentioned, there are some additional concerns. If there's a packed public gallery, then you've got the cheering and then hopefully not the sort of discontent, the booing or whatever, which might happen as well. I tend to sort of, pull them up on that. I always make sure that I say, if I'm chairing, that obviously every view is going to be heard, and they're going to be heard, sort of with equal amount of respect, and not to have those types of interjection from the gallery. Inevitably, though, and I've seen others do it, if you try to say, I don't want any more cheering, then you're probably not going to be successful with that. So I tend to just look at them with my disapproving face until they, shut up. Because it just, sort of prolongs things, and, they're the ones that are having to endure it from a more crowded pre-COVID situation. Obviously that's really it. So yes, there will be occasions when it happens, and you just have to, sort of mentally prepare yourself for it beforehand, I think, so that you don't get in any way intimidated by having the large crowd in.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. And finally then, Linda, the advice question. So as a venerable planning committee member with sound judgment, what is your single piece of advice for your peers across the country aspiring to be the best planning committee member they can be? Well,
never ask a planning or any councillors to give a single piece of advice. We always tend to give a little bit extra. But this section was all about working in the public eye. And I think it's important to know that you are being watched at planning committee. You're being watched by other members, political opposition if you have them, the officers, the public that are watching it all online. And so make sure that you're as professional as you can possibly be, that you're well prepared, you've read your papers, you attend the site visits, you go to planning opportunities when they come up. And if you're looking to propose refusal, make sure you've got some good planning reasons to support it, and keep an open mind until you've heard all the speakers and the rest of the debate. Don't jump in at the very beginning and say, I don't like it, because that suggests you predetermine the application before you've heard the whole debate. And the final one, which could be a single one on its own, enjoy your time in planning. It can be really rewarding and very fulfilling.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you both for your time and giving us the benefit of your experience and thoughts over many years of development. Thank you very much, and I hope people listening have got something from that. So thank you, and we'll say goodbye. Thank you very much.